Brilliant. Welcome, Helen, to my little mini Art of Healing group. Thank you for coming along today. I just wanted to share that when we first met, you had recently been diagnosed with osteoporosis, and it was a shocking diagnosis for you. But I just want to say that wow, how you have transformed that into something very powerful that you're now helping others with. And that transformation has been it probably hasn't feel it to you, but to me, I've been witnessing and thinking, wow, that's absolutely brilliant that you were given lemons and you've made lemonade. So just wanted to congratulate you on that. If you'd like to explain a little bit about you, your background, where you are today, etc.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're right. And it's really helpful to that kind of reminder every now and again about, how far we've come. Because you're right, it was a complete shock when I got that diagnosis. But I'll fill in a little bit of how I got to that point. So the first big change in my life came, career-wise, came 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago now, when I got a different diagnosis. I got a diagnosis of chronic fatigue, which brought my 20-year corporate career to a crashing halt and actually gave me the opportunity to get out of it, which I'd been wanting to do sort of subliminally for a long time, but didn't know how on earth I was going to manage it. So that was an opportunity that I was then able to make the most of. And two of the things that helped me in my recovery from chronic fatigue were hypnotherapy and slow mindful yoga. And I went on to train in both of those. And so 2012, I got ill. 2017, I founded my business. I had a rebrand. It's now called One Step Forward, but it wasn't at that point, but it is the same business. So I launched my business in early 2017 as a clinical hypnotherapist. And I always knew that I wanted to specialize in the medical side of hypnosis, as well as all the stuff that people think of, because not that many hypnotherapists are trained in that aspect of things. And I've always been passionate about the mind-body connection. My own chronic fatigue was absolutely a result of how I'd been living my life, how I'd been doing things. And I realized how much so many chronic, well, in my opinion, ultimately all chronic health conditions come on some level from what's going on internally, psychologically, however we want to describe it.
Agree.
That makes sense to you. And for me, the yoga was also the other side of the same coin, because it was all about I was trained in Scaravelli inspired yoga, which for those that don't know about it is very internal. It's all about being very, very grounded. It's not about, here's a shape I'm making with my body, now you do it with yours. It's much more about what happens if we connect to the ground like this, if we move like this, where does your body want to go? What does your body need today?
Right.
So it all made sense that it was all coming together. And then jumping forward to 2022, which is just over a year ago now, normal Sunday evening at home on my own with my little dog who I had at the time. And I moved from my kitchen into my conservatory, a movement I've made millions of times, probably certainly thousands over the years. And I managed to stand on the other leg of my trousers, which is something that tends to instill a look of recognition from women and a look of complete sheer bemusement from most men. So basically, I tied my feet together and I crashed to the floor because I was moving fast. There was a lot more momentum than there might have been, threw my arms out in front of me, and I broke both my wrists. So I obviously knew immediately that this was something major, and I had to work out what to do with it. So what to do myself in that situation. It was 6:30 on a Sunday evening. I was on my own. And I won't go into the long story about it because but this is something I do share with people a lot, because it was all very much about connecting to my own inner healing power, using the skills and the techniques that I've learned through hypnosis to be able to literally turn down the pain, to make sure I didn't go into shock, and to be able to do all the things I needed to do to get help. Anyway, the healing process was as rapid as it could have been. Everybody was really impressed with how quickly I was healing, which again, I put down to knowing how to connect direct to my subconscious and supporting it all the way through. And I thought that was it. I thought I was sorted. And they'd said from day one, they said, oh, because you're a woman over 50, you'll be signed up for a DEXA scan. And I said, oh yeah, but I was moving fast. They said, oh yeah, but because you fell from standing, it's routine. And I thought, didn't think anything of it. I put it off a couple of times because it wasn't convenient. And then it took months for results to come through. And then finally, when they did, I had a phone call from a nurse who said that I had been diagnosed with osteoporosis. And for those who don't know how this works, it's basically done on the scan is a type of X-ray that scans the density of your bones in particular places, usually the spine and the hips, the femur, hip joint, and then, as I say, in the lumbar spine. And that measurement is then compared against the average measurement for someone of your gender who is a fit, healthy person in their 30s.
Right.
And then depending on how much worse your bones are, according to the scan, from that average, that's how they get the market. And there's a scale below which they say, this is osteoporosis. There is also a place between normal and osteoporosis, which really means keep an eye on it. And that has been given the name of osteopenia. Now, there is some coverage out there that suggests, and even some medics actually, who suggest that osteopenia is a diagnosis and a condition. It's not. It's a progression that you need to keep an eye on. But I was diagnosed.
Which you can what's the word? Prevent from going into osteoporosis if you get
exactly. So so it is a progressive condition, and again, and it's really important to say, obviously, that I don't have any medical qualifications. I'm not giving anyone any medical advice here. I'm simply talking about the things that I've learned from my research. With that in mind, it's quite, well, in that first call, the nurse said to me, there is nothing you can do to make this better. There are only drugs that you can take to stop it getting worse. That tends to be the official line. And I knew I wasn't just going to accept that and be a good girl. So as I say, I did my research. It is possible in certain circumstances to improve bone density that has declined. So for example, when astronauts spend time on the space station, because they do not have access to gravity, their bone density declines significantly. And those people it has been proven that with the right exercises and the right activities, when they come back to Earth, they can improve their bone density again. Now, of course, with astronauts, we're talking about some of the fittest, healthiest young people on the planet, or off the planet. So again, that doesn't necessarily translate to people who in the second half of their lives, but it means that we can hold on to the fact that it is possible. And the other thing is, I had just broken my bones and they'd healed. And how did they do that if it wasn't through growing?
Yes.
So it's like, well, I know my bones can grow.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to listen to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to find a way that I can support them in the best possible way that I can and see where that takes me.
Perfect.
So what I found, alongside all the research I did on things like nutrition and supplements and all of that kind of stuff, I learned that, and again, this is something people do tend to be aware of in principle, weight-bearing exercises and resistance are what we need for our bones to grow. Yeah. And when it got really exciting was when I discovered this program called Bones for Life. And that it's based on something called the Feldenkrais method, which, if you've heard of it, that tells you a lot about what you need to know. If you haven't heard about it, don't worry about it. But it's all about understanding the mechanics of the body and helping them, what's known in this is the movement intelligence of the body, to find the best ways for it to move. Mm. And the woman that created Bones for Life was one of the original students of the Feldenkrais method when that was first developed by Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais. And she taught and practiced it for decades. And then she started being asked whether it helped with bone health, osteoporosis, and bone density in general, and realized that actually, because a lot of those movements are done lying on the floor, it didn't.
Right.
There's a lot of fantastic things, but it doesn't provide resistance and it doesn't provide weight-bearing activity on the whole. So she took those principles and she created this new program, which is also much, much simpler, both particularly to learn to teach, because Feldenkrais is a massive, massive thing to teach and to learn, to train in. There's something like 1,500 different processes that you have to understand. Bones for Life has 90. So I first heard about it in about September of last year, and by January, I'd not only been attending online classes, I'd started a 2-year teacher training course, which I'm still doing.
Right.
And because I was already an experienced yoga teacher, with the blessing of my Bones for Life teacher, I started teaching really quite quickly. Just the basics, the very introductory bits, to start getting the word out there for as many people as possible, so that I can share, because I think it's phenomenal. It's unlike a yoga practice where you really do need to be getting on your mat several times a week for several, for preferably at least half an hour to an hour to start seeing results. This is very different, because you can just do, if you want to do that, fantastic. But you can also just do 5 minutes here, 2 or 3 minutes here, dropped in throughout your day, little things that provide the weight bearing and the resistance that your bones need to keep being stimulated. And a lot of it is based around walking. And the other key thing is the alignment.
And walking without weights or anything, just walking as you are. Yeah.
So walking in itself is essential. So I try and walk every day. I'm only saying try because this week hasn't been brilliant and I'm really feeling bad about it. So I will be walking after this call finishes. But now I no longer have my dog. It has to be a bit more of a,
yes,
you have
so
to make
it easier with a dog, isn't it?
It is. So just walking at least 20 minutes longer, if you can comfortably is really important. The Bones for Life processes help you to make the most of that walking, because they help you to get the alignment of the body starting to become optimal with ease. And there's all sorts of little things we do. Like there's one process that I love, which it's called Roman sandals, because it's all talking about that point between the big toe and the other toes, which is the functional, again, you'll know all about this, but it's the functional center of the foot. And so we do various movements that aren't about saying, this is what you need to do. They say, try it this way, try it that way, try all these different options, and now try this one. And then the body naturally goes, oh, that feels good. And by allowing the body, a whole system, to find the thing that works best, it then starts a sort of series of processes in the brain that the body is wanting to incorporate these ideas.
Right.
And so you do the work in class, and the more you practice, of course, the better. But even if you don't do that very often, there's something that's ticking over that's just letting these things start to take shape.
And then they just become your norm when you're walking around the kitchen cooking or whatever.
Exactly.
Sounds brilliant.
And it's enjoyable. And for me, it's literally replaced yoga postures in my personal practice and in what I teach. It doesn't have to. I know a lot of people who incorporate these, people who are learning to teach or are teaching, who incorporate it into yoga classes. I know people who practice it alongside yoga postures. Because of my diagnosis, I decided that actually it made sense for me personally to just say, this is what I do.
Right.
I still practice yoga, because yoga isn't just about what you do with your body. I meditate. I try and live by the yogic philosophical principles, but the movement part of my practice has now been replaced with these Bones for Life processes.
And so what in terms of a diagnosis, is there ever a way in which they can say, well, your bones are at this age, you're more likely to, how does the aging process happen with osteoporosis? Is there a linear path for it, or is everyone, I presume everyone's quite unique with it, but I'm just assuming.
Great question, Amanda. Thank you. So everybody's bones are increasing in density throughout. Obviously, as a child, they're growing in size as well. But throughout our teens and our 20s, I say everyone, obviously there are always exceptions to every rule, but generally everybody's bones are becoming stronger and more dense through to somewhere around our late 20s, 30 or so. And then come our mid-30s, again, everybody, irrespective of gender or anything else, everybody's bones then start to become a little less dense gradually, progressively. And that's because our bones, like every other part of our body, are living tissue, and they're constantly being built up, broken down and rebuilt. So whenever there's a little bit of damage, isn't even the right word, but a little bit of wear and tear, which is what happens with resistance and weight bearing and activity, just a little bit of wear and tear, the bones get broken down around that area, new bone cells come in, and through that growth time, the rebuilding is happening faster than the breaking down, and therefore they become more and more dense.
Right.
Density generally indicates strength.
Right.
Or correlates to. Once we pass that stage of our mid-30s, there's a shift in emphasis, and the breaking down starts to outpace the building up. Right. So this is why they say you cannot make your bones any stronger, because the natural process is that they are naturally breaking down.
Right.
What then happens, and many people may be aware that more women tend to get diagnosed with osteoporosis than men, and there's a very specific reason for that. As I say, we all start losing bone density in our mid-30s, but for women, as our hormone levels, particularly estrogen levels, plummet in perimenopause and during and around and after menopause, that exacerbates and accelerates that process. And there is research that says that some women can lose as much as 20% of bone density in that 5 to 10 year period around menopause.
Wow.
Now, obviously, that's not new. That's always been the case for anyone who survived through menopause. However, the issue is, if your bones didn't reach optimum density, so that the point from which they're declining is low, that's when you're going to get into problems potentially much earlier on. Yeah. And so for men, the same decline's happening, but they're a decade or so behind us, which is why we tend to see more women with that. And the visible sign when you get to that point is that stooped back, which literally comes because the spinal vertebrae are crumbling. And instead of being stacked neatly on top of each other, they're starting to do that. And of course, once that's happened, that's not reversible. I mean, again, there's things you can do to help, but you can't unbreak the bones at that point.
Yeah, but presumably cause pain.
Yes, and severe osteoporosis, I mean, some people live with it without any problems, and some people have enormous pain. Some people have spontaneous fractures. There's all sorts of things going on. There are drugs that are the drugs that are available now have limitations, and a lot of people have side effects from them. So each person has to make their own call as to whether the drugs that are specifically for this issue are appropriate for them at that particular time. What it is definitely worth mentioning is that because so much of it is in midlife is related to the hormone levels, HRT can be incredibly helpful. And so I personally went on to HRT a decade after my menopause, purely because of my bones, because nobody had told me beforehand that it was an issue.
Unfortunately, we were all scaremongered by HRT and told that it was the devil when it actually wasn't. And I think that's done a lot of harm. But hopefully we're now learning the lesson from that actually it is very safe for people to use. And so fingers crossed more people use it. So it's something that my own personal experience, my aunt had osteoporosis, and my mother was always very adamant in saying that, you know, my aunt didn't take HRT and my mother did. And she was very vocal in her advocation of taking HRT as a result, because it's not, and two of her sisters, both of whom didn't take HRT, both got osteoporosis. So,
and it's an important point that it is, you know, if there is a family history of it, your own risk profile is higher. If you're, I mean, obviously we've already discussed female and age makes your risk profile higher. Being white or Asian, your risk is higher than other races, although obviously it does affect everybody. It can affect everybody. Being slightly built, because if your bones are carrying less weight through their life,
that's less likely to get osteoporosis.
No, more likely. So somebody who is heavier built, their bones are actually working harder, and therefore they're getting more stimulation.
I knew that's the reason why I was overweight.
And that's one of the reasons why people who've had disordered eating and been severely underweight are very prone to it.
But also, I guess people who, you know, I've done a lot of yo-yo dieting in my life. I mean, I am the poster girl. I really, you know, in terms of osteoporosis, because I used to smoke. Smoking is one of the things as well. I've been on a lot of steroids myself, so steroids have definitely contributed to it. I've got an autoimmune disease, which means that I have to be on a biological thing. So there are lots of reasons why. I know myself, I am very interested in this subject, because I think it's, you know, it is important to really assess and look after your bones. I know how, you know, because I've seen through experience, my aunt not even wanting to be touched. Even I would suggest, you know, just giving her a gentle massage, and there was no way she would want that, because she could have broken her bones very, very easily. And just with a gentle massage, it could have broken her bone. So
it's terrifying. It really is. And I think, and absolutely, you're right. There are people who are in that situation. There are also people who are afraid of getting to that situation, and then when they get a diagnosis, particularly if they're a bit older, they then start wrapping themselves in cotton wool.
Right. And that's the
worst thing you can do, because the whole point is you want to keep moving, you want to keep the bones getting that stimulation, because otherwise it's a vicious circle. Again, you know, one of my contributing factors is the fact that I've had a sedentary job my entire career. And in fact, I realized 24 years of my life, I lived in properties without stairs, and most of them I worked from home, so I didn't commute, and I wasn't I didn't do exercise. So all of these things have contributed, plus stress, which
not great
levels of stress. So again, this is one of the things I love about Bones for Life, because it's very accessible. It can adapt to what somebody's abilities are. If somebody's fit and healthy, they can build them in. If they want to go and do weightlifting in the gym as well, this is a brilliant way to make sure that you know how to get your alignment so that your weightlifting is benefiting you, not damaging you. If you want to go and, you know, do run marathons or something, this will still give you real benefits. And if your idea of exercise is to walk to the end of the, you know, to the post box and back, it'll give you something that you can do to support you in that as well.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for people, you know, there isn't anybody who wouldn't benefit from it. I know often we only go to things at the point at which we need it, but I think this particular course is something that everybody can benefit from. So almost as a preventative, if you know that you've got it in your family, if you know that it is really important to get to learn, and how you can prevent it from happening.
Absolutely. I mean, when people say to me, so who's this for? I flippantly say, well, it's for anyone with a skeleton.
Exactly. Yeah.
Obviously there are people for whom it's more directly relevant, but directly urgent, shall we say, but I absolutely think, particularly for women, you can't start doing this too soon. And what I've done, so at the moment, what I've done is I've created a 4-week introduction course, and it's simply it's just a class a week for 4 weeks, all online. And then there's a Facebook group for support and so on. And it's the foundational principles and the core practices that give you an idea of what it's all about. It does give you things, even if all you ever do is that 4-week course, you will have processes that you can take out into your daily life. And we cover about 18 different processes, not all in depth, but we explore them. And as I say, there's 90 in total. So my plan is that I want to get as many people as possible for doing this introduction course so they can see if it feels right for them. And then for those who want to start doing more further down the line, I'll be doing some online classes for people who've already done the introduction course, so we can start exploring some of the more complex processes and see where it takes us, because it's all new for me as well.
And there's nothing like doing something in your work that is also going to benefit you, which is that's what I keep saying. I run a daily online meditation group because I want to meditate daily, and that's it's a definite incentive for you to do that work yourself as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, I remember I spoke to my Bones for Life teacher, the lady I'm doing my teacher training with, literally a couple of months into our teacher training, maybe 3 months in, and said, when do you think I would be able to start teaching this? And she said, well, you've been teaching yoga for years, because she's watching us teach as part of the process. So she's seen me teach. And she said, you can start teaching now, just don't teach anything I haven't taught you.
Okay. Perfect.
Well, that makes sense. So that's what I did. And so all the stuff I'm teaching, we did in our very earliest days. I've done them over and over again. I know exactly what I'm doing with those. And at the same time, I'm learning more stuff, which in turn, I'll be passing on to people.
Brilliant. So, yeah, I mean, and is there a way now for you to identify how it's working, if it's working? Are you able to have another scan to see what the bone density levels are like? Is that something that they do, or once you've been diagnosed, do you not get a scan unless things happen?
No, once you're in the system, the norm tends to be that you get a scan every couple of years. So I'm a year on now. So in theory, I'll get another scan next summer. It's not quite that simple, though, because the scans themselves have a lot of issues around them. So for a start, this is just crazy. There's no standard calibration for the DEXA machines, which means that official advice is, if you possibly can, make sure you have every scan on the same machine in the same hospital so that it's compared to previously.
Okay. And
then alongside that, there's the issue, because what they're doing is they're sending an X-ray beam through your let's say your hip.
Right.
So it has to go in at exactly the right place and at exactly this, or the same place and the same angle as it did last time, in order to get a tattoo comparison. And so one of the things I learned from my research was, after my first scan, I badgered my GP until she was able to get me the actual images of my scan, whereas normally you just get, here's the written result.
Right.
And so when I have my next scan, irrespective almost of what the results are, I'm going to go to a couple of Facebook groups that I know where there are people who know about these things and say, here's the first picture, here's the second picture. Before I decide whether to believe it, can you tell me if it's been done in the same way?
Yeah.
And it's crazy that that's what we're having to do. But the fact is, we don't know enough about this. There's a lot of research going on about it. It's the same with the drugs. The drugs don't build bone. They just stop the bone from declining further. And they have all sorts of other implications. So there is a push, particularly at the moment, there's a big push to get some more research going on and get some more information about it. I'm really hoping that somewhere along the line, it's going to be the Bones for Life program is going to get picked up on, and people are going to start putting some research into the results it's having.
Yeah.
But as you know, as we know, that takes money. So
Yeah. And
tricky.
time.
And of course, it's not something that has a nicely profitable pill at the end of it. So
I used to work in the radiotherapy department in the cancer unit. When they were having radiotherapy, they would, it's some certain types, they would have to have a tattoo so that the radiotherapy would go in the same place every time.
Right.
I wondered if that was something that maybe that could be done for the scan.
It would make sense. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. Well, it's already being freely done on the NHS. They're very tiny little dots that are really you can't really imperceptible to see on the skin, but they are visible then for the machine to know exactly where to place. So it might be worth asking, as that is done for radiotherapy, is it something that they would consider doing for osteoporosis? So
yeah, that's fascinating. I'll have to do some research into that.
Yeah. Well, if it's going to make the comparison easier to identify it, it's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? To say, you know.
I think the other thing that's important to say as well is that we measure bone density because it's the only thing we can measure. Bone density probably correlates with bone strength, but there are plenty of people who have poor DEXA scan results who have never fractured, even if they've fallen. Because you can't measure how strong something is, even if it's a bone, in any other way than by bending it until it snaps, and that's not ethically very appropriate. So there is no currently there is no way of measuring bone strength. So the only thing they can measure is bone density.
Right. So it could be not so dense and then still strong.
Exactly. And so again, that's something that, from my point of view, and as a hypnotherapist, I'm very conscious always of the messages that I'm sending myself and the people I work with. And so even if my bones are more porous, osteoporosis, that's what it's about, it's a bit more air in them, that doesn't necessarily mean that all the work I'm doing can't make them stronger anyway, because nobody can prove that either way.
And what about, I have tablets, which I'm terrible at taking, calcium tablets, vitamin D3. Are you advised to take those, or?
Yes, I mean, certainly even, the NHS advice is take calcium, eat lots of calcium and so on. And then again, I'm being very careful to stay in my lane here. I'm not a nutritionist. I've done my own research. There's a vast amount of discussion about the best way to get the calcium into your system. Do you eat a lot? Should you eat a lot of dairy? That's the traditional way of absorbing a lot of calcium. But then there's the whole issue of alkaline and acid body environment and animal products making the body more acidic. And if the body is more acidic, in order to return to its naturally slightly more alkaline state, it needs to leach calcium into the system, and the place that comes from is the teeth and the bones. So there is an argument that dairy actually exacerbates the situation. Right.
But leafy greens are
fantastic. Yeah. And there are other sources, and there are supplements. I mean, I do take a lot of supplements, and I've worked with a nutritionist to say, what do I need? This is what my diet's like, and so forth. And I definitely encourage everybody to do that to whatever degree they're able to themselves. It's another thing which I've discovered is that prunes are supposed to be really good for your bones. I believe it's boron that's in prunes, and there has been some research done that has shown that eating 6 prunes a day can help your bones. I thought I loathed prunes. I hadn't eaten them since school lunches. I wasn't even going to go near them. Do you know what's fascinating? I really like them now. Okay. So I take that I have 6 prunes with my breakfast every day. And as far as I'm concerned, that's my body going, yeah, that's helping, because it's enjoying the taste.
Yeah.
And
And
if
also the mindset is already, if the mindset's believing that too, then it's doubly effective, isn't it?
And I think the thing for me, and this is another way where, you know, finding Bones for Health really helped, because it's all helped me to change the narrative. And as you say, you know, we first really met when I was absolutely in a terrible state about this diagnosis. I mean, I was fitter and healthier at that point in my life than I'd ever been, and I'd suddenly been told that my bones were crumbling. I was 56. And what all of this has done, doing my research, talking to people, realizing that I have to make my own decisions, because I can find one person who says this and one person who says the diametric opposite, and academic research that completely contradicts each other. And then finding this program which actually gives me something practical to do. And funnily enough, I mean, it has, over that period, I did also lose my dog, as I mentioned. And I've really noticed a shift in my mindset when I'm walking. So I used to walk because my dog needed to walk every day. I knew it was good for me, but that was my motivation, was to give her the walk she needed. When that went, I had to rethink. What this has done is that I now walk for my benefit. I am aware that every heel strike as I walk is helping me. And that means that I'm much more likely to think, I haven't got round to walking today. I'm going to just, you know, stick something in the oven and do a quick runce around the block. Because even that is helpful. If I thought my walking was only about, you know, cardiovascular activity, that wouldn't really have been worth it. But when I know that every footstep is helping my bones, it's like, well, I'll just do 20 minutes. I haven't got time to do more, but I'll do that. And that all helps me completely change the narrative around what this diagnosis means. It's just something I live with, and I intend to live, you know, I will live with the rest of my life. And I don't intend to break any more bones. I learned what I needed to from that. Which brings me to one final point, which is the best way to make sure you don't break bones is not to fall over in the first place.
So don't wear trousers.
I don't wear trousers that are longer than my legs anymore. But it also means balance, coordination, being grounded, and being able to walk confidently are incredibly valuable. And that's another thing which you also get from yoga. You know, don't get me wrong, from yoga postures, that's one of the things I definitely got from my yoga practice. But Bones for Life also helps with all of that. And it really helps you to move in your body in a different way, and to get, in fact, Ruthie Allen, who created it, talked about it creating a sense of biological optimism, which I love.
Perfect. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I remember my sister, she tore her gastrocnemius muscle. Oh no, actually, it was another injury. She did something to the tendon in her foot, and she was out. She was playing tennis. And I asked her, do you remember what you were thinking at the time? And she said she wasn't sure about the move that she was doing. And it was things going on in her head. And then she sort of turned. And it's really important to really notice what your thoughts are, because we can, that I have noticed myself, just when I'm feeling unsure and I'm just walking and not paying attention to walking, I can turn on my ankle because I'm just in that process of thinking of something that isn't, where I'm not feeling confident, I'm not feeling sure. And I think it's really important to really, you know, if you're doing mindful, if you're going for a walk, it is important to be mindful of what you're thinking and what your process is, so that you're not, there's lesser potential for injury, etc.
And I mean, one of the other things that, again, I was told, and I'm sure everybody is told in that initial call with the diagnosis, is the fact that statistically, once you've had a fall, you're more likely to fall again.
Right.
And statistically, it's true. Now, I spent 20 years as a business analyst. I understand statistics. And even in the midst of my despair in this call, I called the nurse out on this, and I it's very nice. I said, I understand what you're saying, and I completely understand why you're saying that. And that statistically, somebody who has fallen is more likely to fall again. And in fact, this happened with my mother. A couple of years ago, she fell, and she'd already got an artificial hip. So she fell and broke her pelvis. And 6 weeks later, she fell again and broke her femur. Now, she wouldn't have had that second fall if she hadn't had the first one. So I completely get that this is true in some situations. But as I said to the nurse, the fact that I fell yesterday, given that I fell by tripping over something, given that it was a set of circumstances that I can change, my risk of falling today is no higher than it was yesterday, unless somebody makes me terrified of falling, in which case I will spend my life worrying about falling. And we all know what we focus on is where our attention goes, and that's what happens. And it makes me so cross that people get this idea instilled into them. Yeah. Because you've fallen now, you're going to fall again if you're not very, very, very careful. And yes, we need to get people to understand that they need to be careful, but equally there's a way to do it in such a way that you're giving them positive support about how to avoid it, rather than going, oh no, you don't want to do anything risky now.
It's the same as parenting. If you tell your child, don't put your fingers in the electric socket, what are they going to do? They're going to go and put their fingers in the electric socket. So it's actually about, most parents use healthy distractions to stop them from doing the thing that you don't want them to do, rather than pointing it out to them so that they can go, oh right, I'll go and do that.
I never thought of that. Now you mention
it. Exactly. So and you're continuing still to do your hypnotherapy practice, and you do most of that online, or?
Both. I mean, obviously, over the last few years, a lot of it's been online, but I've noticed there's definitely a growing trend to people wanting to come in person again now. Most people who are local enough to me, or even within an hour or so of me, to me, are coming in person now. But I also work with people who aren't even in the UK, so I do a lot of online as well. And as I said, I work across all sorts of areas, but I do particularly love helping people with this mind-body connection, and the working with using hypnotherapy around surgery is an absolute game changer. And again, it all dovetails beautifully, because I do a lot of work with people, for example, having hip replacements. Even if somebody isn't particularly nervous about surgery and they just can't wait for it to be all done and dusted, when we can bring the subconscious mind, when we can explain to the subconscious mind that this procedure is part of the healing process and not further trauma, that in itself makes everything much smoother. And then on a really physiological level, if your body has been, it's back to visualization, if your whole system has been primed to know that when this happens, it gets relaxed. So when they prepare you for surgery, you feel deeply relaxed and calm. By the time they're going to give you anesthesia, whether that's a general anesthetic, a spinal tap, whatever it might be, you're already relaxed. So you're highly likely to need less chemical anesthesia to get you to the required state. And on a completely physiological level, the less anesthetic you have, the more quick your recovery will be. And so there's all sorts of things like that, where we're working with the body's system and the body's natural processes, enhancing the immune system's ability to kick in as soon as it's right for it to do so, all of that kind of stuff. And I haven't had a single person who's worked with me with surgery who hasn't said it made the whole thing so much smoother and more easy and even enjoyable.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's a shame that it can't be kind of as standard before everyone goes into practice. I know when I was working in the Fountain Centre, we had a hypnotherapist there who was doing some trials on women having the breast reconstruction surgery post treatment, and he did some trials on that, and which I gather were very successful. But
I'm aware of a research study that specifically talked. I don't know if it would be the same one, but there was that we talked
Gary
about women.
Coles. I don't know if you know Gary Coles.
I don't know. I don't know him. I've looked at a lot of the research studies, and there was definitely one around breast reconstruction where hypnotherapy was. They used it as an opportunity to test it. Again, like so many of these holistic treatments and therapies, the problem is that a good hypnotherapist doesn't treat everybody who presents with the same condition in the same way. So it's very hard to create the sort of evidence-based research that the NHS requires.
And also to get the authorization, to get the consent at the right time and the right, he was exhausted by it, because it was just, there's a limited number of pool of people you can work with. And then the limit is who actually is going to want to do it, when they, is the surgery going to be at the time that you need it to be when you're doing the trial, does the surgery get delayed? Yes, always, so, there's just so many variables that can go wrong, and did go wrong for him. So it wasn't an easy thing for him. So the reason I set up this particular chats with people was because as I might have explained to you before, that I became very unwell through mindset, through stress, through my father dying of cancer. I developed ulcerative colitis, and I firmly believe the main contributor of that was through stress and through not sitting with my feelings for long enough, because I didn't really want to. Who wants to sit with the sad emotion of somebody dying? It's not, and it's incredibly stressful when you have 18 months of knowing that someone you love is going to pass. And so the impact of that had a huge impact on my body, and I know it caused me stress. And so the whole of my, like you're now doing with your business, is my business has stemmed from and grown from, because I only became a therapist after my father was diagnosed, wanting to help people to express themselves in whatever way is safe and right for them. And so I asked this question with allowing a space for complete openness, honesty, and whatever it is that you feel safe and confident to talk about. But it's a very simple question that we get asked regularly, but how are you?
I'm doing okay, actually. Yeah, it's been an interesting, I had a tough August, and I've come through it. And this week is the first week in a long time where I've actually felt that I was able to start doing stuff again. And I find it's very interesting, because clearly there's something else that I still haven't learnt, to put it in a simplistic way, because just as I come to a point where I think, okay, now I'm okay, now I know where I'm going, something else comes in with my body and causes an issue.
Right.
And it's always something different. This is what's interesting. It's not a recurring thing. I mean, I get migraines, but that's different. I know when that happens. That's when I overdo things on a practical level. But most of August, well, all of August, basically, I had a tooth abscess. And again, we've been talking about the fact that, I do tend to take a holistic approach. It took 2 rounds of antibiotics, which I was really unsure about. But the second round was, if I hadn't done that at that point, they'd have taken the tooth out, and it's a molar. So it's a big deal. And again, what effect that will have on my whole system. So it's really interesting. So that's where my pausing comes from, is that I've had that. I've had some family stuff. My mother's had recently had surgery again, although thanks to the hypnotherapy, she's doing incredibly well this side of it. She's now telling everybody about hypnotherapy for surgery. So yeah, thank you for the question. And I am doing well. I'm doing well. I'm excited about this next round of the course. I'm really hoping to get a few more people involved. We have got a group taking shape already. But yeah, next round starts the week of the 25th. Live classes are Thursday evenings, starting on the 28th of September. And it's just 4 weeks, 1 class a week. So it's been completely designed as an opportunity for people to see if this is something they want to learn more about.
Great. And so when you say live class, do you mean that in person? So
on Zoom, live on Zoom.
Okay, live on Zoom.
But with interactive, people, I will be, there's quest again, it's very different from a yoga class. Most yoga classes, there's a flow, whether it's fast or slow, but there's a flow through and people just do, follow the instructions. This is more, we do something, we have a little chat about it, we do the next thing, we have a little chat about it. So it's as interactive as people would like to make it. There's lots of time for questions and observations and so on.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we come to a close?
Well, I was thinking about it and I thought I'd like to offer any members of your group who do decide to join the course a discount.
Lovely.
If they use the code Amanda111.
Fab.
Get the code, the course for £111 instead of the usual price of 123.
Brilliant.
So
Thank you very much.
And if anyone's got any questions, of course, just drop me a DM. I'm very, very happy to have a chat with people.
Well, all your details are in the chat and they'll be on the YouTube video as well. So brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along today. And I'm really pleased, as I said at the beginning, to see how you've managed to turn this something which could have been very negative into a very positive, and I can feel your passion about it and your enthusiasm, which is very attractive. And I know many people will come along and join your courses. So thank you very much for coming along today to talk about it all.
Thank you, Amanda. I've really enjoyed it. It's lovely to see you.
You're welcome.